Hi, my name is Bill Carmody, and I'm the Marketing Whisperer. And I am thrilled today to have Peter Dunn, also known as Pete the Planner, on our show today. How you doing, Peter?
I'm good, Phil. Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled to have you here. I know that you are one of the top five financial advisors in the U.S., and you continually do some really cool things on CNN, and you write for USA Today, and so you're a hell of a celebrity yourself. What I really wanted to talk to you, though, is about what you started with was yours as a comedian, and I'm just loving the fact that you actually went from comedian to financial advisor.
I think a lot of people, I had very diverse interests early in my career. I was a financial planner by day, and then I was a comedian in college. And so in my early work years, it made sense to have that energy outlet, as we'll call it, on the weekends. And things were going fine. I loved it. I was sort of a straight guy by day and comedian at night. And it was a lot of fun.
Well, so how did you though switch from being a comedian to a financial planner? So like, what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, so it was definitely a dual life situation. They were both going on at the same time, and the reality was I never aspired to be a professional comedian because I figured at that point I was either going to be an average comedian that knew a lot about money, or I was going to be a financial guy who's funnier than everyone else. So I went with the second choice, and that's about 2004, 2005. I in a sort of a moment of epiphany, I thought, why don't I just slap them together? Right? Why am I a guy in blue blazer with a bad tie on Monday through Friday, and then I'm a guy in a bad blazer and a jacket on Friday nights and Saturday nights? And so that's whole the Pete the Planner brand. It kind of came from being myself, frankly.
Well, that's obviously the best thing you can possibly do. I'm just what I'm really curious about though is that you are on a mission, right? You're a mission to basically help everyone become a millionaire. Is that right?
Yeah, which is a strange mission, and it inherently sounds scammy, right? I'm the first to embrace this, but here's the reality. Every financial statistic you look to from a personal finance standpoint points to the idea that anyone in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, in order to have some semblance of a retirement, is going to need at least $1 million.
Right.
So what my industry's done is they beat around the bush for a really long time. I mean, myself, I've beat around the bush. I've said, hey, Bill, I want you to be resourceful. And you say, oh, okay, man, that sounds good.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, right, yeah, sure. I like resourcefulness. But then if I say, look, man, you've got to be a millionaire. You really have no choice. This is exactly how you do it. And by the way, it's just resourcefulness. But it's the same thing. And we've got to accept the fact that if you don't have at least seven figures, what's this going to look like? There are no pensions anymore. Social Security is struggling. Inflation gobbles up buying power every 25 years. It cuts it in half. And so it's just the truth.
Well, so and this is the thing for me is that when you look at sort of financial planning, it's always about the number. And I think what people look at from a money perspective is no one ever teaches us about money. You go to school, you learn about math, you learn about reading, all these different things, but no one's like, money's this sort of subject that nobody really wants to talk about. And yet it's the thing that defines whether or not we're going to basically be happy or not in our retirement years, whether we can put our kids through college, and whether or not we're actually going to live a happy life or a really painful life, right?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between a financially successful person and a financially unsuccessful person is not their understanding of math, Bill. It's their understanding of behavior.
Right.
So think of toilet paper. When you're in the restroom and there's a full roll of TP, you'll use whatever you want. You'll go 5-ply, 6-ply. You'll make necklaces. You'll throw it at your parrot. You don't care because it's a full roll of TP. You cannot run out on that transaction. If you did, you had bigger problems.
Right.
But when you look over and you see cardboard, your behavior shifts, right? And I said shifts, by the way. It shifts, and so that's the challenge, is when faced with more resources, we can't fall prey to what everyone does, which is to use more resources.
Right.
You have to make the same decisions with no matter how many resources you have, and that's the concept of resourcefulness. Bill, people make their worst decisions on payday in America. They make their best decisions the day before they get paid. And it's so understanding that and taking advantage of how we think about money is what leads to success, not making more money. I used to work with professional athletes all the time. And the answer was, hey, I got my next contracts coming up. It'll be huge. And I was like, well, you're just going to spend more.
Right.
I mean, that's what we all do, right?
It's why when people who win the lottery go broke 5 years later, right?
Yeah, money magnifies who you are, right? So if you get more money via an inheritance or lottery winnings, or you can catch a football, it's going to magnify your soul. If I can get super dramatic, it just will. And by the way, when we all get raises, as our incomes go like this over time, our behavior shifts alongside of that. So unless you control it and even out your spending, you'll never retire.
All right. So what's the secret? So you're telling everybody you want to make them $1 million. What is it that they need to do to control their behavior and continue their spending here while their income goes up?
This sounds like a 12-step plan, but the first it's actually a 10-step plan. The first step is to truly admit and accept the fact that you have to be a millionaire. I mean, everyone who doesn't feel that way is in denial. You can't be in your 20s or 30s or 40s specifically and say, no, that's not true. And Bill, what I face on a regular basis is people that say things like, well, the system will change, so I don't have to do anything. Or college, the whole way college is structured will change, so I don't really have to save that much for my kids' education. And that's really kind of a loser way to look at it. It's
totally.
Like, I want the entire environment around me to shift, and so I can stay the same. And so accepting the idea is number one. Number two, we have an app coming out in about 2 or 3 weeks. It's called the $1 Million Day. Okay. And it's an app on your iPhone that tells you the exact day you'll be a millionaire. And then it gamifies the process of moving that day up so we can actually focus. No, thanks.
Well, no, but see, because that's the thing is that I think your whole point is correct. That, there was some ridiculous statistic recently that the average American couldn't come up with $500 in case of an emergency. And that's like, it's insane to me. It's like, if there's an emergency and you need money, you can't even come up with $500. That's crazy. Like, how are you ever going to retire?
Yeah. Consumer habits are to blame for this. If you want to dig deep, well, who should we? Because we love blaming people.
Blame everyone, yeah, except for ourselves.
Right. There's no mirrors around, so we're not going to blame that person. Let's blame consumer habits. So since the 1950s, the size of our homes, new homes, are 300% bigger than they were in the 1950s. And our family units, whatever we want to call those, are smaller.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? And then there's the idea of, I'll call it a myth, that home ownership is the American dream, and all the government and quasi-governmental agencies that have hitched their wagon to this idea of home ownership is empowering and it helps people. And the reality is home ownership has ruined more financial lives than it's helped. I mean, think if you've got financial problems, Bill, how can buying a home solve that problem?
Well, the thing is, people say your home is your asset. It is an asset. It's just not your asset. It's the bank's asset, right? You owe the bank to basically pay it off.
And then, look, you've said this. I know I've said this. I've justified a terrible purchase decision before by saying the I word. Well, it's an investment.
Right.
It's like, well, probably not.
Right.
I mean, engagement rings are the one I hear the most. It's an investment. Investment in what? Like not sleeping in the couch? Like,
yeah, exactly. Not sleeping on the car. That's it.
It doesn't make sense. So our consumer habits are worse. I mean, even think about the idea of travel sports. Right. I live a half mile from youth soccer mecca. I mean, there are tens of thousands of people that come in every weekend to play youth soccer by my house from 5-6 states away, and you're telling me there's no 12-year-olds you could have played along the way between here and your... It doesn't make sense. The resources we spend on the things that will eventually cause student loan debt, if you think about that. I'm going to pay to play soccer in Indiana versus to send my kid to college to play intramural soccer or whatever.
So there's got to have been a point when you said enough is enough, right? So when you decided to go out on your mission and say, I want to make sure everybody is a millionaire so that they can retire and they can live a good financial life, what was the tipping point for you?
There's a few. Number one, it was probably 2005, 2006, right after I sort of merged the comedy side and everything else together. I met with this couple. They were attorneys. They were making almost $400,000 a year as a household. Great money, especially in the Midwest. You're basically a Rockefeller with $400,000 in the Midwest. And they were a disaster. Like they spent $1,200 a month at CVS, yet they didn't have any illnesses. It was just like the general store. They just had hundreds of dollars a month in soda or pop or whatever you call it based on where you live. Yeah. And so I was like, what's going on here? And so two highly educated people with awful habits. And so something had to change. I said, how can super smart people that make a ton of money not figure this out? And by the way, if they can't, what are the chances for the people behind them?
Mm-hmm.
So I started to develop ideas of how to help people who don't do what they know they should do. Because that's the only rule of money, is to spend less than you make, yet who does it? Right? That's the problem I'm trying to solve. How do I get you to manage your behavior and spend less than you make, because you know it's true, you just don't do it?
See, I think everybody has a money print, right? You know, the thing at some point as a child, you sort of saw something about money that sort of imprinted on you. For me, it was my uncle, right? I remember sitting at a restaurant with a giant family gathering. It was probably 15, 20 people around the table. And we were at a high-end restaurant. And I'm just thinking, oh, my God, who's going to pay for this? This is going to be expensive. You know, everyone's drinking and whatnot. And I remember, I'm like 10 years old. I'm like, this is going to be an expensive bill. How are we going to pay for this? And I remember my uncle just taking out his credit card and just handing it to the waiter without even looking at the bill.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy that knows how to basically pay for, like, has enough money that I can basically treat my family without even worrying about what that bill was. And so for me, that was like, okay, great. But that could be very disastrous if I'm always using my credit card to pay for things that I want to pay for others without having the money to spend, right? Without having the actual cash behind the credit card to be able to pay that off, because then I'm just putting myself in debt every week, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. What we learned super early in our lives financially from the people that raise us, it's super impactful. And half the time, I feel like I'm trying to break the mold of what is created in those situations. You know, you and I, or I specifically, I don't know the rest of the story about your uncle and who he is and how he is and all those sorts of things. Maybe that was a bad idea. Right. I don't know. And so let's say the rest of the story is, 5 years later, he filed for bankruptcy. Like, I don't know, right? And so then my job would be to break that habit.
So I think, you know, the interesting thing about money is that it tends to be one of our biggest taboos in the United States. People would rather talk about sex than money, right? And the thing about money is that, you know, people are always wondering, like, well, how much should I make? What's my salary? What's, you know, all these adjustments. And this is where I think it's challenging, because as business owners, entrepreneurs, you know, we go in there to make money, right? We go in there, we start this business, but then it's this whole sort of discipline of not even paying yourself because you're so pushing it forward. You're worried about your employees, you're worried about your business, you're worried about all this stuff, and you're cheating yourself in order to be successful. Do you see that a lot?
All the time. I mean, and there's several things going on there. Number one, it has a lot to do with people always want to define success, but I won't get caught up in that. I will define financial success, though. I used to think personally when I was in my 20s that it was making enough money to do whatever I want.
Right.
Which
financial freedom.
Yeah, but now I totally disagree with that definition. It's really a matter of making it so I don't have many financial obligations. I don't think most Americans are going to retire because they have a bunch of money. I think most Americans are going to retire because they don't need a bunch of money.
Okay.
I think it's a huge distinction. So that's a big part of it. Number two, I'm a big believer in blowing money. Mm-hmm. I only blow money after I've taken care of business. Like, I know the exact dollar amount I have to put away to fund retirement, my kids' college, and once those are done, if I want to buy a $60 bottle of wine,
go for it.
Right? But it's the person that says, I like wine, I don't care, I'm going to buy it. And they buy it, and then reality will punch them in the face 15 years from now or 30 years from now, and then you're regretting wine, and no one wants to regret wine.
No, not ever.
Unless there's too much wine and then it's the next morning, but that's different.
So tell me, how are you getting the word out? So obviously you got a lot of great media channels, media outlets. How are you helping people discover what they need to do differently in order to be a millionaire?
Well, my USA Today column is sort of the core of what's happening these days, at least within the last year. Millions of people every week get to pick it up and get my view on money. And what's interesting about being in the money section of one of the largest circulated newspapers in the world is all the other columns, they're great. I mean, you got the likes of Robert Powell. I mean, you got great columnists. Mine's weird. Right? I mean, I'll talk about how life insurance is like the sport, the two-man luge. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Why is a guy laying on top of another guy going down an icy hill? It makes no sense. It's kind of like life insurance. So it's just weird, right? I take that comedy side and I slap it together, and frankly, it kind of reads like a blog post more than a column in a newspaper, and that's how people consume media.
Right.
I'm not there to teach this is how much you can put into your IRA. Google that.
Yeah.
You can get perspective from me. And so that's the core. And then my podcast is called $1 Million Plan. And so it's 2 episodes a week. In one episode, we fix one person's financial life. They call in, or right here where I'm at now.
Awesome.
And, we fix their financial life, and we've been doing that for we're episode 79 right now.
Wow.
And then the other episode of the week is just what we call Pete's Money School. So I'm just teaching a concept. Last week was transportation and how people ruin their financial life to have a $503 a month car payment for 68 months in a row. And so it's really about education at that point.
So you've also written like 10 books, right?
Yeah, 10. And we're working on one right now. And by we, I just say that. I don't know why I say it. That's me. I'm doing it. But I tend to
You have a team.
Well, we do have a team. They're all out there. But I'm the one writing it. And yeah, and I was never a writer. My first blog post was in 2005 in the fall, and it's like every first terrible blog post. Today feels like the first day of school. It's just so stupid. And 5 days later, it's we're on a Saturday, and my wife's out doing something, and I'm sitting on my computer thinking, I don't have a 6th post. Like, I'm out. Like,
This is it. I'm done.
I've told the world everything I know, and then like anything, you practice and you develop your perspective. And it's great. I actually consider myself a writer, despite the fact that my English teacher from high school right now is probably having convulsions hearing me say that. I consider myself to be a writer who needs several editors.
Well, and it doesn't help. It helps that you have this comedic background too, because then basically you inject humor in everything you're doing, and that makes it a lot more entertaining, so people want to pay attention, right?
Yeah, and I also think about financial advice for a second. Oftentimes it's delivered from someone on a mountaintop shouting down to the plebes like, hey, this is how you do it. I want to walk up the mountain together, right? I'm doing okay financially, but
Sure.
I'm not a bazillionaire. Like, this is a really sort of self-deprecating, it is a vulnerable situation in which I'm saying, look, I write about my financial issues. I wouldn't call them problems. I mean, they are first world problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Problems. But to me, that's what it's about. It's about financial companies not acting like they know everything. And it's about saying, look, our behaviors are our flaws. A few weeks ago, I was flying through Philadelphia. I had a layover at like 9 a.m. I ate a 15-inch cheesesteak at 9 a.m. Like, what's the result there? We all know. And so we make mistakes based on behavior despite our knowledge of how things actually work. And so I'm right there with everybody else.
So in that vulnerability state, sort of talking about going up the mountain with folks, talk to me about some time when you just almost completely failed. We've all been there. We're basically like, you've just completely, like, you've lost it, and you're like, oh my God, I've lost my way, and things are falling apart, and then how you turned it around.
Yeah, I rented a house out that we should have sold before we bought our other house. Of course, picture this. It's the spring of 2007. The height of the real estate market.
If you only knew then.
Mrs. Planner and I decide to build a new house, and so we do, and we don't sell our other house. We're like, we'll figure that part out later because it's the spring of 2007. And so we get a renter in there. Fast forward a couple years, things are going okay. My wife is now pregnant with our first child. And I'm on the phone with my renter at like 9 o'clock at night, and he owes me $8,000 in back pay. I'm a reluctant landlord. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm yelling at this guy. I'm like, my wife is pregnant. You are stealing from my unborn child. And he just hits me with the truth of all truths. That's not my problem.
Oh, ouch.
And so when you expose yourself to anything like that, where you lose control of your destiny based on someone else, I'm no longer interested in that. Like, I'm no longer interested in my financial success is dependent on whether my renter pays me. I mean, that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
And so I started to just look at things differently. I quit depending on the economy to shift around me. As a business owner or a commission salesperson, you're always talking about seasonality or this or that. But every time you do that, you deny your role in the process. And so I don't want to say it's a no excuses approach because I have some amazing excuses.
Don't we all?
Yeah. But, like there's a business there was a jewelry business where I live a few years ago that went out of business, like this really popular jewelry business. And I remember reading the article about it, and the owner was like, well, with the economy. And then you just look at all the other jewelry stores and you're like, what? What are you talking about?
It's what you tell yourself to make it okay. You know, it's like, it's not me. It's not me. It's the economy. It's somebody else, right?
I went to a black tie event this past weekend, a fundraiser, and I was wearing a tux, and my tux button didn't pop off my suit this time. Right, like it did like 3 or 4 years ago at the same fundraiser at a different tux, and it was like, when you do that, you can go, man, this tux is not made very well, or you can say, I should mix in a salad from time to time.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Those are the little clues that teach us that we need to change and stop, blaming other people.
So tell me this: where do you go from here? So you've gotten all this great success. You've got all these articles. You've got these books. You've got this blog. You've got this podcast. All these things you're doing. So what's next for you? How are you sort of continuing to fuel the growth?
Yeah. So what guides me every day is that I change at least one person's viewpoint on money.
Awesome.
I don't care who it is. I don't know. Like today, after this, I'm going to one of the largest accounting firms in our city and doing a workshop to people who are much smarter than me, who are better at math and who are better with numbers, to show them how to be financially successful and what the tools are. And so to help one person more every single day is sounds so terribly cliche, but that's what I care about. Number two is just staying hungry and passionate about new ways to teach people about money.
Yeah.
People hate budgeting. Bill, I don't know if you've got the inner office memo about hating budgeting. And so I'm trying to do it that keeps behavior at the forefront without using crutches like technology. I think sometimes when people use technology as a crutch financially, it makes the problem worse. And so I'm just trying to appeal to people's sensible side, no matter how deeply it's buried within their brain.
Pete, thank you so much for all you do. I really appreciate the advice that you continue to give to all the people that follow you. I think you are on a fantastic mission. I definitely support that mission. I think it is important that everybody sort of gets to a point where they have financial health, and they're not just successful in their personal lives, but they're actually successful in their financial lives, to empower them to do all the things that they wish they could be able to do.
Absolutely, Bill. Thanks for your time and all your work as well.
Great. For more information, go to facebook.com/marketingwhisperer. We can continue the conversation there. Thanks so much, and have a great day, Pete.